Where will the 2025 NFL free agent class land? We make our picks and predictions tonight on the IBT podcast.
I've been going dummy, out of bounds, putting on a clinic. Stick around, carrots in my hardware. KC, caught him in the crosshair. Look at me, been the guy calling Mr. MVP. Keep your ass on the bench by my MPC. Earn my stripes like I fixed this league. Your dog's on the turf, my dog's in the street. You can find me somewhere in between. Never a dull moment like a movie scene. About to do the ops like I did this beat. Let them keep talking RG3. Coming to you live. This is the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast.
All right. It is Tuesday, February 28th, 2025, and this is the In Between Fantasy Football Podcast, your place for both a refreshing and feel-good take on fantasy football and NFL gambling. We're back in the fortune-telling business tonight with our free agency predictions. I'm your host, Seth Woolcock, and I'm joined by a man who, word on the street, is a big asshole on airplanes these days. Our entertainment and NFL betting expert here at IBT, Boston's boy, Steve Lawson. Steve, what's going on? Have you stopped being rude to middle-aged women on flights yet?
I have not. I don't like to fly. I get very nervous to fly, and the last thing I want to do is talk about you or your children or your grandchildren on a flight if I don't know you. So I think it's actually far more rude to speak to me in any way, shape, or form when I haven't initiated the conversation. I'm just trying to listen to my music. I do want to issue an apology to the woman who sat next to me as I flew out to Cleveland this weekend. I forgot my headphones for my phone, so the only music I could play was via the Little Mermaid movie. So she was trying to watch on my screen because she forgot like the plug-in headphones, and I just kept bouncing to all the songs and listening to them over and over again because I just wanted music in the background. And this poor woman was just tortured. So I truly apologize.
Wow, that's even worse.
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad.
My goodness, remind me not to ever fly with Steve. Also tonight, we're joined by a guy who does some flying of his own quite a bit, a big business, a light ranching son of a bitch, Eric Romoff. Eric, how are you feeling? Kind of the calm before the storm of the NFL offseason really picks up, and are you too an asshole on flights?
I am flying high tonight. I think that, man, I might fire off my hottest take of the entire 2025 calendar year right now.
I'm not ready.
I think the offseason in fantasy football is better than the regular season.
No.
I like looking forward. I like projecting. I like what
crazy.
could be. I love boats, but the mystery box can be anything. It could even be a boat. I absolutely love the offseason. Maybe I'm being a bit hyperbolic, and I think I'm a delight to sit next to on a plane. I'm not the psychopath that is going to initiate a conversation with a stranger. But if some little old lady is feeling lonely on her Southwest flight from San Antonio, Texas to Philadelphia, PA, and she wants to chat with me and tell me about her life and tell me about her worldview and her lived experience that I haven't come across, I'm absolutely here for the perspective. I think that those little social interactions that are just completely superficial, you're just there together for 2 hours and then you'll never see each other again. I think that's one of the delights of life. I think that is part of the spontaneity that makes this whole life worth living.
Dude, I'm not saying I don't appreciate it most times. It's just on a flight, I am a nervous flyer. Like I am very anxious. And like, here's the problem. And I'm going to say this, and I'm going to sound like an idiot for the whole internet to hear, but I stand by it. I know how planes work. Okay, I get it. Lift, thrust, propellers, the whole thing, right? I don't believe it should work. That's where I run into trouble. I truly sit in that and I'm like, there's no reason this glorified tuna can should fly. Like, I don't get it. Because no matter how hard I chuck a tuna can, it's not going to like sail off forever. You know what I mean? Like, it's going to fall. And I just don't understand how it doesn't. I do when they describe it to me, I'm like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. But it's like when someone tells me the Yeti isn't real. Like, what are you talking about? Of course it is.
All right, that's a whole different intro for a whole different program. Because I mean, I could riff on Yetis and Bigfoot. I think we have actually in the past, but You're an asshole, Steve. You're overthinking it. It's all right, though. You're still a good person. We still love you. We appreciate you being here. As do we appreciate the IBT family riding with us tonight. We got TD Toronto Dave in the chat. What's up, Toronto? Hope you're having a great Tuesday evening. Thanks for joining us, man. We got Albert saying good evening, IBT. Good evening, Albert. We appreciate you, brother. And also Ben riding with us as well, one of our IBT family staff members. What's up, Ben? Good to see you, buddy. Tonight's program, it does look like this. Back in the day, we're going to look back on the 2024 free agency class and make our predictions for 2025. Also, weekly advice, give you our top 3 early pre-draft best ball tips. If you're in those underdog streets, you need some advice so you don't blow all your money like I have in the past. We learn from experiences. That's what we do here at IBT. Also, please, if you like this video, if you enjoy this type of content, give us a thumbs up if you do, and also subscribe if you are new. We're here Tuesday nights every single week, chopping it up about NFL and fantasy football. And also a couple quick announcements as well. I did want to remind everyone that our 2025 Draft Night Out tickets are on sale. So if you want to come draft with us, plus 200 plus fantasy football enthusiasts on August 9th in Canton, Ohio as part of the Fantasy Football Expo. Tickets are available now. Shot wheel spins, giveaways going off, everything in between. We also have a bunch of new league formats this year. We're not just doing redraft. We got best ball, superflex, dynasty, a Champions League going on. Here's a little bit more about that and what you can expect here from 2025 Draft Night Out.
This whole town could be red by the end of the day. If you feel alright, we could throw it and drive. With the radio up so loud they can hear us from miles. Me and you, nothing to do. These days they come and go.
All right, so super excited about that. Make sure you guys are coming out, hanging out with us if you're going to be in Canton, Ohio for the Fantasy Football Expo this August. We can't wait to see everybody. And what do you say, gentlemen? Should we go ahead and jump in? Any more side bet wagers maybe we're going to place tonight? I know we got the internet's hounding you right now, Eric. I don't know if you've checked our comments, but they do not like your shade on Tyler Warren right now. I am definitely in the majority of that one.
Man, I will place a tequila shot bet with the entire internet that Tyler Warren will not be a top 15 pick in this year's draft. And all takers at Fantasy Nav, get in my DMs. I'll happily take a free tequila shot from all of you.
That's going to be an expensive tab, or you're going to be very drunk. So either way, somebody wins out there. Let's go ahead. Let's jump into it. Back in the day.
They ain't make them like this way back in the day. Took a shot, couldn't miss way back in the day. Couldn't predict how it could all change. Don't you ever forget how far we came. How far we came. Never forget how far we came. How far we came. Remember how it was way back in the day.
All right, back in the day is our way of looking back on the past, reflecting a little bit on it, and moving forward as we make some picks and predictions. We're talking free agency tonight. We'll look back at the 2024 class, see what lessons we can learn, and then apply it to our picks for 2025. In 2024, gentlemen, it was quite the free agent class. Some big names at the quarterback position, or at least so we thought. Kirk Cousins on the move to the Falcons. Baker Mayfield re-signs with the Buccaneers. Russell Wilson goes to the Steelers, and Gardner Minshew signs with the Raiders. Those are really the quarterbacks movement or non-movement that happened with Baker Mayfield. And really, Eric, like Baker Mayfield was the only quarterback in that class who worked out for fantasy purposes, QB3. So when looking back on 2024 and kind of projecting forward to 2025, are you less excited about kind of the veteran quarterback movement going around the NFL right now?
I think I'm about equally as excited as I was last year, right? Like, obviously Baker turning in a QB3 performance is probably not something we're going to see from the 2025 free agent class at quarterback position. But I think the story to underscore there is that while talent is obviously a part of the equation, circumstance, supporting cast, system, and scheme they fall into, these are all things that far outweigh the talent of the individual player, right? Baker Mayfield drops into the system and has attempted 566 and 570 passes in his 2 seasons as a Buccaneer. If you take any of these guys that we're talking about in 2025 and project them out for 570 pass attempts, they're all going to look pretty good, right? So while it's fun to play general manager and talk about where these guys are going to go, take a good look at the system they're falling into, and that'll be a better indicator for you.
Steve, looking at the running backs from last season, Saquon Barkley, banger, RB1, goes to the Eagles. Derrick Henry, RB4, goes the Ravens. Josh Jacobs to the Packers, RB8. We had 3 RB1s change teams just last year in free agency. Tony Pollard, an RB2 in the Titans system. DeAndre Swift continues to be an RB2 with the Bears. We even had J.K. Dobbins rise from the dead, RB18 with the Chargers. The only place it really didn't work out was Devin Singletary. Obviously not as much of a loaded class this year by any means, but it seems like running backs, do you think they can switch teams and it's easier for them to have success after moving as a veteran?
Absolutely it is. So here's the thing about running backs that I think most people don't realize is that it's probably the easiest position of all the skill positions to switch into a new offense, because the A gap is the A gap no matter where you go. You know what I mean? And no matter how you number it, whether it's an ABC gap or a 1-3-5 gap, whatever you do, however you run, it's kind of the same idea, right? A draw is a draw. The talent, though, that we saw teams that had a need at the running back position, go out and pay 3 of maybe the 7 best running backs in the league in general in terms of talent. So while, yes, it is easy for a vet to move and go somewhere new and succeed, this was a unusually talented class where 3 different absolute Hall of Fame caliber talent running backs moved teams. And Josh Jacobs will get me some heat for that one. People will be like, he's not. I defy you to find someone who's been more consistent and being out there and producing year over year over the last 5 than Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. I want to classify him as a Hall of Fame talent by any means, but
I don't think he's a Hall of Famer yet. But if he just keeps going, I mean, he's better than Frank Gore.
Yeah, and I think the thing to highlight is all 3 of those running backs way better prospects than kind of what we have in the free agency pipeline this year. And it's also a loaded free agent or a loaded NFL draft class at the running back position.
Yeah.
So I don't expect teams to spend up a lot on the running backs. I don't expect a lot of fancy goodness from moving running backs. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Also want to touch on the wide receiver class from 2024 that we saw shifting gears. It was Calvin Ridley to the Titans. He was back in the wide receiver 4 range, so not a great hit. We saw Mike Williams go to the Jets. Awful season for him. He ends up on the Steelers. Marquise Brown misses most of his season with the Chiefs. Wide receiver 58 in points per game when he gets back. Gabe Davis with the Jaguars. Wide receiver 99 on points per game basis. Curtis Samuel, wide receiver 106 on a points per game basis with the Bills. Really, Eric, it was like Darnell Mooney to the Falcons. He was a wide receiver 3 in points per game, and that's about as good as we got with some of these moving parts at the wide receiver position last year.
Yeah, another take of mine that got flamed at the time on those old Twitter streets was if the addition of Kirk Cousins moves Drake London into wide receiver 1 conversation, it should probably also move Darnell Mooney up your board, right? And look, he is the one thing that is not like the others on this list, right? Calvin Ridley, he put up a fine season, right? That entire offense was really stuck in the mud. But everyone else, Mike Williams, Marquise Brown, Gabe Davis, Curtis Samuel, were all in super crowded situations, right? Darnell Mooney was one of 3 and a quarter viable pass catchers in that offense, right? So kind of the same story I was saying with quarterbacks, right? Pay close attention to guys that are not going to have a lot of target competition, because that is going to go a long way in determining their fantasy value.
Absolutely. It felt like a lot of those receivers kind of moving in teams weren't moving into wide open receiver rooms by any means. So let's go ahead. Let's shift into our 2025 predictions. Let us know in the chat too, where you think maybe we're going to get right, where you think you would go differently. We want to hear from you guys. We appreciate the IBT family riding with us. And Steve, I want to go to you first. You think Justin Fields is on the move and that he's heading out west. What are you seeing for Fields' outlook currently, and what would it mean for fantasy football purposes?
Yeah, so right now Justin Fields just kind of doesn't have a home, right? I've heard a lot of people talking about Russell Wilson going to Las Vegas to play under Pete Carroll again. I don't know if that's really something either of them wants to do and rehash. You know what I mean? Like, it kind of ended odd for Russ in Seattle, then he gets traded, and then it's like a debacle in Denver. I just don't think that works. The Raiders are so far away from being anything right now. I know Pete Carroll doesn't want to be part of a full rebuild, but I think Justin Fields is a kind of quarterback that can go out there, run and pass, and where you're really lacking pass catchers in that offense, you need a quarterback who can create with his legs, and that's Justin Fields. You're not going to get that from any other QB in this free agent class right now. Fantasy-wise, if this does happen, you are looking at someone who is going to be the entire offense, right? Like, I know Aiden O'Connell has developed some sort of weird cult following.
Yeah, dude, there are
toward
some
the end of the year. Like, they're out
yeah.
here talking about him like he really is like Drew Brees 2.0. And I hate to break the news to you, like Raiders fans, that's just not true. Like, he just looked good because he was compared to Gardner Minshew. Like, fair or unfair, that's the truth. Like, the ball throwing machine would have been better than Gardner Minshew this year. So you need a quarterback who can put the offense on his back. And for better or for worse, the Steelers, I still believe, made a mistake starting Russ over Justin Fields. That offense looked significantly worse under Russell Wilson.
Towards the end of the season, yeah.
Russell Wilson's arm is weaker. He's a weaker arm than he used to have. His legs are no longer really a factor in his game. It's not that Russ wasn't good. It's just that he's not good anymore. And Justin Fields is the young, high upside quarterback that a team like Las Vegas really could use.
Yeah, and if there's a situation where they don't get Shedeur Sanders, or you know they still don't go, they're going into free agency not knowing what's going to happen in the draft too, so they might want to cover their ass either way with the Justin Fields play here. And I don't think it's a crazy thought, but by any means, we know that he's kind of a hard worker and definitely a locker room type of guy. That seems like Pete Carroll's MO out there, and him in a Chip Kelly offense would definitely be fun too, I think. So kind of fits that college style game out there. So
yeah,
don't mind that. Eric, if Justin Fields were to end up in Vegas or somewhere else where he is the presumptive starter, are you drafting him like he's a quarterback one?
Probably. The only issue I'll have with your statement is the word drafting him. I think he'll probably be like close to undrafted, but he's someone that I would like to acquire for his upside.
He's got QB1 upside. That's what he was last year when he was in, man.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think he'll be drafted as such, is my point, right? So, whatever. Let's say he goes to Las Vegas. Implied in that circumstance is that they're probably not getting their quarterback of the future in the draft this year, and he is the presumptive starter. He's probably like the 19th.
Yeah, I was going to say like mid to low end QB2 is probably where he'd be drafted.
So I would totally take him at that draft price, right? Pair him with a nice floor guy, Jared Goff or whatever. And at that point, you're really just hoping that he can hold the job for the entirety of the year. The thing that I like about this call in particular is that Justin Fields is young enough to where the coaching staff in the front office can somewhat legitimately stake a claim that they think he's got some upside to his game, and they can finally be the ones to fix him. And they're not full on tanking, but he's also bad enough at throwing the football to where they can still be tanking and get a good draft pick next year to go out and get a quarterback. So the fit is just immaculate. I think this one is bang on.
Like it, Steve. Eric, what do you have for us in your quarterback predictions for the 2025 free agent class, my friend?
Yeah, I'm gonna get a little bit creative here, in part because I have already said into a hot microphone that I think this is going to happen. Sam Darnold is going to be franchise tagged by the Minnesota Vikings and then traded out into the world. For me, I've got him landing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Your beloved Lurs are
Lur Nation.
perpetually good enough to be right around the playoffs, which means they're never bad enough to be in the rookie quarterback market. Shout out Kenny Pickett wherever he may be. Super Bowl champion Kenny Pickett.
Yeah. He saw
I'll
some
put
snaps,
respect
baby.
on his
Yeah.
name. Yeah, he definitely he was clutch there in those 17 and 18 weeks during the Super Bowl run. But Sam Darnold, look, he fits the Steelers mold perfectly, right? Like, he is someone that, he can come in, they have enough cap room to pay him, and while their games are not perfectly identical, there's a decent amount of overlap between him and Ryan Tannehill in the Venn diagram. A Ryan Tannehill that Arthur Smith had post back-to-back top 10 quarterback seasons in 2019 and 2020. So look, for whether or not it is going to get them to the eventual promised land, the Steelers refuse to head into a full rebuild. So they're going to look at someone like Sam Darnold, who can probably keep them competitive. A Sam Darnold that would probably have them at least closer to winning a playoff game if he was dropped onto last year's team. And I think there's a lot of appeal here, both in terms of just kind of the mentality of this front office, but also his fit into the Arthur Smith scheme.
Smells like 10-7 or 9-8, Steve. What do you think? It smells like Mike Tomlin keeps that streak alive.
This is such a Steelers move, right? Personally, I don't want to see it happen. I would like to see young Jackson Dart end up out in Pittsburgh.
I don't think we have the capital to go at him now. He's getting steamed up.
He's getting steamed up. I still don't know if he'll go that high. I think you may have a shot at him in the draft. I think he's still enough of a project that that's like that. Oh, some scout told me. Like, I saw someone tweet this, and I 1,000% believe. I think there's this rogue scout in the NFL that just calls all the reporters and just tells them the most obnoxious shit just to get the ball rolling and throw everyone off. Because I've seen Jackson Dart's a top 7 guy, a top 5 guy, a top 3 guy.
I also think there is some politics that go into play in the NFL scouting community, and that you steam up certain players because you're connected to certain agents who are connected to certain teams. I think it's a little bit of a circle when
there definitely is a quid pro quo thing. Hey, get our guy up and we'll give you good inside scoops, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But as far as Sam Darnold to the Steelers, this does make sense, especially even if they do draft Jackson Dart. Honestly, I don't even hate that move for him to sit behind him and learn for a year or two. Because I don't think anyone in this quarterback class outside of Cam Ward, and even he's a little iffy for me, is pro ready. I think it would behoove any team that drafts these guys to sit them and let them learn. Because if you wind up Sam Darnolding these quarterbacks, they are going to see ghosts, and that is not good.
I wouldn't hate Sam Darnold in Pittsburgh. I definitely think you would need a couple more weapons there to really succeed, just because the offensive profile that he was working with out there in Minnesota was legit. I mean, you got the best wide receiver in Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison to boot as well, TJ Hawkinson, who looked pretty healthy by midseason, and Aaron Jones in the backfield. So it'd be a lot of work to do.
The problem is Jalen Naylor also would probably be he'd probably push Pickens for the wide receiver 1 spot.
Easy. Take it. What do you? Okay, you're upset because of the plane ride earlier or something. He would definitely probably potentially be our wide receiver 2, but
he'd definitely be your wide receiver 2. You know what? I'm not going to get into debate right now.
Yeah, we're not going to have that. I would like to move forward though with some quarterback predictions, specifically kind of the fallout of if Sam Darnold does move teams. I think that if the Vikings lose Sam Darnold, they have 2 choices. A, sign Aaron Rodgers, or B, roll the dice with Daniel Jones until J.J. McCarthy is ready to go. And despite being an early believer in Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, I try to stay out of the predicting Aaron Rodgers business as much as I can, especially with the smoke now linking him back to the Rams organization. Coming into last season, I think most of us would have said that Daniel Jones is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold, or at least had more success in the NFL. I think Kevin O'Connell thinks the same thing. That's why he signed him. I think he trusts his ability to take a chance on the guy who beat him head-to-head in the 2022 playoffs. And if this happens, Daniel Jones immediately has quarterback one upside for fantasy and will likely be the best value in redrafts at the position. Never had an opportunity to work with a supporting cast close to what Minnesota currently has. And also, he was a quarterback one in fantasy football in 2022, largely by way of 708 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns. I think he kind of plays similar to J.J. McCarthy a little bit as well. And he's coming out of the bright lights of New York media to kind of help mentor him a little bit. I mean, he had to replace Eli Manning. It wasn't a great situation he was going into. He had a bunch of, Joe Judge as a coach and then finds Brian Dable, but still, I think he could be a great mentor and a bridge quarterback for the Vikings. So give me Danny Dimes here, Eric, to the Minnesota Vikings.
I'm a bit conflicted here because I feel like you are very right and very wrong at the same time. Daniel Jones, I don't believe will be a quarterback one in Minnesota because at least the reporting that I'm seeing is that JJ McCarthy is a bit ahead of schedule on his recovery timetable. And that was an injury that he suffered in early August. Right?
Yeah.
So obviously we're projecting out several months into the future, which is always going to be a bit wobbly. But, I think that there's at least some cause for optimism that it's JJ McCarthy from week one there in Minnesota. But I still think under my premise that Sam Darnold gets franchise tagged and traded away, be it to Pittsburgh or otherwise, I think there's a lot of value in bringing in Daniel Jones, right? He was on this team for the stretch run, right? He was there, as they were heading into the playoffs. He's familiar with the system. He does offer that veteran presence, right? So whether it's they need to get him out there for a couple of weeks to buy some time for JJ or just to be that steady hand who's familiar with the playbook, who can be one of the better backups in the league if something happens to JJ McCarthy on what should be another very competitive Vikings team. So I love the call that Daniel Jones sticks here in Minnesota, but I don't think we're going to see him play enough games to where he's really on the fantasy radar.
Y'all are crazy for this. This is a crazy take. You guys are on what y'all is smoking whatever Aaron Rodgers is in the offseason. I will tell you right now, if I was JJ McCarthy's camp, if they ever said you're going to get mentored by Daniel Jones, I'd be like, trade him now. Get him out of there. That is not the man you're going to have teach him how to play quarterback at the NFL level. Daniel Jones is not a starting quarterback in the NFL, and he's not a very good backup. Like, we watched what he did.
He won a playoff game a couple of years ago, and he was working.
Bro, Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl, okay?
Bro, he was thrown to Isaiah Hodgins.
That is the comp. That is the comp. Like Trent Dilfer, Daniel Jones, both not very good quarterbacks.
Yeah, like
phenomenal teachers, phenomenal on the board.
I don't know if Daniel Jones
in terms
is
of like breaking down the system.
Teacher. I've seen nothing out of him that indicates that he's got this like entire grasp on the system either. Like, yeah, he was there for the stretch run, but like he bounced around. No one really wanted him like to come out. It wasn't like every team was fighting for his services. I don't think Daniel Jones to the Minnesota Vikings would be good at all for Daniel Jones because I do think JJ McCarthy is if it's not Sam Darnold, it's JJ McCarthy.
Steve, you gotta think though. This is the guy who made Joshua Dobbs, the astronaut, look like something. He's made it work with Nick Mullins
for 2 games. I mean,
I know. But if he can get 2 games out of Josh Dobbs, a career journeyman backup, and if he turns Sam Darnold into what Darnold is today. I think that Daniel Jones could be more serviceable than we're giving credit for.
I think the thing we're forgetting is that Sam Darnold in particular is significantly more talented just in general than Daniel Jones is. Like in terms of arm talent,
6 picks in the NFL draft. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but one was Sam Darnold, and everyone was like, "That's a lot."
Yeah.
Daniel Jones got drafted, and it's not like, listen, he did not hold the starting job because he earned it. Okay, everyone and their mother was like, why on earth are the Giants still rolling out Daniel fucking Jones all this time later? And honestly, I'm shocked it didn't cost Dable his job. This is not a good play.
Okay, that's all right.
The wild thing is I also kind of agree with Steve. Like the thing that I'm pulling from your analysis is if you're in a position where you're relying on Daniel Jones as your starter, things have gone very poorly for you, right? And like I don't think he has the on-field talent to be a meaningful contributor in the NFL today. But I mean, from what I understand, his football IQ is insane. His ability to grasp a system and to read it back. It's really just like executing it on the field. That tricky little part is what's holding him back. And look, if anyone can do it, it's Kevin O'Connell. I would have the highest degree of confidence in this coaching staff, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen. I think it's more just like, look, we need a solid backup because we think we have another contending team. And he's
if Daniel Jones is a starter for the Vikings and has a QB1 season, I'll eat those stupid hot wings from Buffalo Wild Wings live on air.
All right. You heard it here first.
He's not eating the wings.
Also, last thing I'll say on Daniel Jones is I want to see him with good wide receivers. He's never played with him. He played with like the ghost of OBJ, and then he had a couple games that he was running out with Malik Neighbors in the beginning of his rookie year. Like this guy's been throwing Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, like solid wide receivers.
Darren Waller, Kenny Galladay.
The end of both of their careers as well. I mean,
the end of both of their careers started when Daniel Jones was their QB.
All right, most overpaid free agent signing ever.
It's Daniel Jones. That's the most overpaid free agent signing.
Kenny Galladay, bro, he gave him like 200 yards and said, see ya. All right, let's go to the running back position. Eric, throwing it back to you, man. Let's stick with the Vikings. What do you think's happening with their man in the backfield, Aaron Jones?
Yeah, Aaron Jones, another key free agent acquisition in the running back market last offseason. And he flipped around and put up a very serviceable campaign in his 1 year as a Viking, so much so that I think as we talk about all of this turnover at the quarterback position, presumably Sam Darnold out the door, some combination of JJ McCarthy and Daniel Jones under center. I think they're going to covet a bit of stability in the backfield, a guy that can play on, both early downs and on passing downs, a guy that knows the system well, a guy that is getting, deep enough into his career to where he's willing to be creative and flexible in terms of how he approaches his contract overall. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see kind of like a distilled version of what Josh Jacobs got out of Minnesota last year, like a 3-ish year deal that's a little bit front loaded. They can get out of after a season or two pretty easily. But, while Aaron Jones is, on the short list of viable free agent running backs this year, I think he's probably going to get the best deal and have the most interest out of his current team, at least from last year, the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, it's a great point, man. And the Vikings aren't strapped for cash by any means. They have a little bit of wiggle room that they can work with and try to get Aaron Jones back in the building. Seems like he's another great locker room guy to have around the facility. So excited to see him potentially back in with the blue or with the purple and yellow out there in Minneapolis. Steve, where are you going here with running back? Where do you think potentially a former Broncos running back could land?
Yeah, I have Javonte Williams landing in Cleveland. With the untimely demise of Nick Chubb, Cleveland is in cap hell because they have that albatross on their books named Deshaun Watson. Cool. And then Myles Garrett wants out of town. The team is basically crumbling all around them. Javonte Williams is that guy that is built to take a big workload that the Browns like to give their running backs. And he could probably do something with it. Like, I don't think it's going to be great, but you can slam him into the offensive line 20 times and see what happens. He'll probably go on a pretty cheap deal, really front loaded 1 year, like really a 1 year deal. That's like
one deal, prove it.
Yeah. Like with options or whatever. And I think Cleveland's the place that makes the most sense, right? It's obvious Denver is not interested in his services anymore. I was torn between the Browns and I was kind of waffling between them and the Saints, to be honest with you. And so Cleveland just felt like with everything going on, they needed just some cheap guys that they could beat the hell out of. And that feels like Javonte Williams to me.
Where would you take him, Steve, if he lands in Cleveland and Nick Chubb signs elsewhere?
Late. He's just not talented enough to really contribute in that way. And that offensive line isn't good enough.
Yeah, I don't know if Cleveland can put any money into the running back position, though, Eric. That's like my only issue, I think, with this landing spot is it's just such a loaded running back class. We know they need to find the heir of Nick Chubb. I believe Jerome Ford's still on the roster for at least another year, or at least he has an option or as an RFA. So I just don't think they can. I mean, but is Javonte going to command anything, I guess? So I guess, might not be a terrible call here, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, that's really it, right? Like the reason why this is such a phenomenal call is that Javonte Williams probably isn't going to have a whole lot of suitors, and the Browns have almost no money to spend. Really, the only thing that they're hoping for is that Deshaun Watson doing TikTok dances without his boot on will nullify some of that contract, and they'll free up a little bit of room. And even if that happens, they're going to spend all of that money trying to retain Myles Garrett, right? So they're not going to have any money. They're not going to have any money to spend. Javonte Williams is going to be looking for work. He will be in the mix there with Jerome Ford for at least another season. So, pretty firmly off the fantasy radar unless something unforeseen, breaks and it's just him back there. And I mean, you can look back to last year's free agent class, right? Like, Aaron Jones was on a 1-year, $7 million deal. I don't think he draws that much.
No.
Maybe like a Gus Edwards 2 for 6.5 kind of range. And honestly, Gus Edwards might be a pretty reasonable kind of outcome for him, right? He's going to end up in a spot where he might start getting the majority of the work early and then cede some work to a young guy or to more of the passing down back and forward as the season goes on. But I mean, all of these extrapolations, largely end with him not being someone to take too seriously in a fantasy context.
Agreed with you guys there. We got Mike in the chat saying, "Hi guys, fantasy football never ends. It never does, Mike.
Not for us.
Mike's one of our boys. I believe Mike was at Draft Night Out last year, hoping he can attend once again.
I think I have it on good accord. Mike's already got his ticket for this year, so we'll be raising a glass to cheers Mike here in August.
Let's go, Mike. Appreciate it. Hopefully Mike can take home some giveaways and maybe a shot wheel spin or two as well. I'll round us out here at the running back position, gentlemen. It's a fairly weak running back free agent class, as we have noted, but I do think Najee is the best running back under 27 available. So if you want to commit to a guy for a little bit longer term, it is probably Najee Harris, former first-round pick, didn't quite live up to the billing with the Steelers. And I think someone is going to overspend to get him. Why not the Raiders, who have $95 million in cap space, the second most, and their current running backs under contract are UDFA Sincere McCormick, Zamir White, who they don't act like they like a lot, or Dylan Laub, who they also act like they hate and wanted to run out Sincere McCormick and Amir Abdullah over Dylan Laub. It would be the most Raiders thing, I feel like, of all time to go out there and sign Najee Harris a year after they let Josh Jacobs walk and a month away from a running back class with embarrassing riches within. I think the Raiders offense, with not a lot of current help in the pass game outside of our guy Brock Bowers, that Najee would probably be a high volume, low efficiency RB2, potential RB1 upside depending on the quarterback. And it kind of reminds me of maybe what he was earlier in his career before Jaylen Warren was stealing significant work in Pittsburgh. Hey, it's the guy who might see 250 plus rushing attempts. He might catch 50 plus balls. He's not going to have a good yards per carry, not going to have a great yards per reception at all, but he might fall in the end zone 10 times and he's going to get you fantasy points. So I would like it if Najee Harris lands in somewhere specifically like Las Vegas. So, Steve, you have Justin Fields going there. So do you think 2 Pittsburgh Steelers could wind up out there in the Sin City?
I don't, because I see Najee going. I just don't think he's going to command a contract like we think he might. I honestly see Najee kind of more as a Charger than I do as a Raider. And I think that's kind of, I think a 1-2 punch. J.K. Dobbins showed that while he does have plenty of talent, he just can't hold up throughout a season. So you need someone to take that weight off of him. And that feels like Najee to me. But if he does go to the Raiders, you are absolutely right. Like that. The reason why this may work out is like Marshawn Lynch, right? Marshawn Lynch kind of was almost Najee Harris before Najee Harris when he was a Bill, right? He wasn't the most explosive. He was kind of just there. He put up numbers, but it was like kind of ugly numbers. And then he went to Seattle and went like fucking crazy. And Najee runs in a similar style. He's a little more finesse than Beast Mode, and Beast Mode, I mean, I won't compare them too much
Right.
because
Yeah.
like I've never seen Najee do it. But I mean, this man does have what, 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. It's not like
Yeah.
he's a schlub out there. He gets it done. I think the Raiders need that right now. The only reason they'd avoid someone like Najee is because they don't want to win, right? Like you don't want him to accidentally fall into the end zone, win you a game, and then
I
you're like,
think they
"Shit,
want
I
to
just lost
win.
another one."
I think they want to win, dude, because
That's what
like
I'm saying. It's like they have to decide: are they going to go for a win or are they not? And Najee Harris does fit. I mean, they don't have any other running backs. Najee feels like it's not the worst move. I don't hate it.
we got Ben in the chat saying, why do I feel like they'll select Judkins or Henderson out of Ohio State to pair with Chip? That wouldn't be a bad situation either.
Probably a pretty good idea.
Yeah, Eric, your thoughts here on Najee? I know you also liked him to potentially land out there in Los Angeles.
Yeah, breaking the fourth wall a little bit. I was trying to stump for Najee to head to Los Angeles because, look, if the Chargers are going to do the ridiculous thing of continuing to employ Greg Roman, you might as well supply him with a running back that can field that type of workload. They have a comparable amount of cap space. Look, so much of this is kind of contextual in nature, right? Like in a world where the Raiders are able to move up and to get one of the top 2 quarterbacks in this year's class, they're probably sending out a lot of the draft capital that they would use later to draft a running back in this year's class. Therefore, signing Najee Harris in free agency probably makes a lot of sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like where your head is at in so much as whether it's the Chargers, whether it's the Raiders, right? Like we're all honing in as 2025 somehow being the year where Najee Harris is the prize of the running back class.
Yeah.
We're all honing in on spots where he would presumably be the lead back, and that's obviously a phenomenal thing in the fantasy context. So I err on the side of the Chargers being the more likely place, but either of them would be perfectly suitable. And don't you be out here trying to sneak on all of the IBT viewers and listeners with your random qualifications, the best running back under 27 in this year's free agent class. Najee Harris turns 27 in like 3 weeks, my guy. And I'm pretty sure the other guys that are 27 or older are to the effect of like AJ Dillon, 26.8 years. Travis Homer, 26.5 years. Like,
well, I was gonna say the best.
Find that cutoff line to where Najee Harris is the best anything of all time.
I was gonna say, that's for sure. I was gonna say the best running back in this class in general, but Aaron Jones, I would probably say, is still, maybe a higher commodity asset. But Najee's younger, so people would feel more comfortable giving Najee a longer term deal. That's really all I was going with there. Yeah. Mike in the chat saying if Najee leaves Pittsburgh, will that open the door for Jaylen Warren or the Steelers acquire or draft a running back? First round of beers on me, boys, giving us a $5 super chat. Michael, thank you so much, brother.
Thank you.
We appreciate you a lot. That'll go right back into us planning and preparing for draft night out 2025. So appreciate that. I think it could open doors for Warren. I think the Steelers also probably go after a running back in the draft, just given Arthur Smith's temperature and what he likes to do out there. So I wouldn't think it would be Warren all to himself, but I do think that the Steelers do require a running back. Also asking, what about Rico Dowdle? Maybe to the Chargers if the Cowboys draft Genty. It's tough because we 2 different timelines here. So the Cowboys gonna have to make a decision on Dowdle before the NFL draft, but Dowdle's kind of the other guy we haven't really talked about in this class, guys. Like, any random thoughts about where someone like Rico Dowdle could end up?
I think Dowdle is absolutely out the door in Dallas. He's going to be he's going to clear the way for an incoming rookie back, right? Where he lands, I mean, look, Chargers have the need, right? Raiders have the need,
like a Patriot.
I was almost,
like,
and they have a shit ton of cap too. Yeah,
they do. Like,
well, I don't think they'd have to spend it on Rico Dowdle, right? Like,
no,
it's really like
under contract. I think
who needs someone to eat up like the work between the 20s and can take on like a small to medium sized contract. That's a lot of teams.
I also wouldn't be shocked to see like someone like Ramondre Stevenson hit the free agent market from being released from his contract, and that would open up Dowdle to New England, because right now they do have Stevenson and Gibson, And they were actually pretty good last year. And I think Gibson's, we know my thoughts on Antonio Gibson.
Yeah, I think good is a reach, but that's fine. That's fine.
Like, there were definitely games where, like, when they let him get into the offense, the guy was, explosive like he always is. He's a good receiver. And then Ramondre Stevenson is a good between the 20s runner. I don't know.
Hold on to the ball.
When he can hold on to the ball, but he has those fumbling issues. And he signed a contract. I don't know what his, extension looked like, but he may get released. So, as far as the Jaylen Warren thing, though, I just want to go back to that. I don't know if he's going to ever see I think he's kind of a fantasy football darling that for some reason the NFL coaches just aren't seeing it, because he looked to us significantly better than Najee, and yet he took a back seat, and I just don't know if they'll ever truly give him.
This year was a tough year for Warren. He started off injured. I think he was never really
and then he
fully
kind of
healthy.
came in and faded out, and then came in and faded out.
Yeah,
And
he was better in 2023 than Najee, but
there's a real chance that, honestly, because he became a fantasy football darling, Arthur Smith just wants him to rot and die. So it's I wouldn't put all my eggs in that Jaylen Warren basket, is all I'm saying.
Let's go to the wide receiver position here. I'll throw my prediction out to you guys first. It's Keenan Allen to the Chargers. Year one of the Jim Harbaugh era, to me, was establishing a culture, establishing a tough physical offensive front. I think year two is all about giving Justin Herbert weapons to succeed. I'm working currently on my mock draft 2.0, and I think if they don't reach for a running back in that first round, I think they take Michigan tight end Colston Loveland if available. Therefore, they'll still need a wide receiver who can help draw coverage away from Ladd McConkey. And how about a guy who had his best career season just 2 years ago with Justin Herbert, over 108 receptions, 1,200 plus yards in just 13 games? Maybe the type of guy who would also maybe take a team-friendly discount, like a 2-year deal, retire a Charger. I know some people might be like, hey, man, they both play in the slot. Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, kind of a weird fit. But Keenan actually played way more outside last year than ever before, only had a 43% slot rate. So I think he could play the outside a lot and then go in the slot about the 36% of the time where Ladd is on the outside. Or maybe Ladd's emerging as a true number one in this league, and they run Ladd more out of the X and Keenan more in the slot. Either way, I think it makes a lot of sense to hashtag bring Keenan home, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's reporting that would corroborate this story, right? I think it was about a month ago he was interviewed, and he said, if he's not coming back to Chicago, which there's rumblings that he might be a cap casualty there, that he would like to return to Los Angeles and play for the Chargers.
I'm pretty sure he was on a 1-year deal. He's out the door regardless.
Yeah. So, his preference, I guess, is that, he either comes back to Chicago or that he returns to the Chargers. I mean, look, I like the fit. I like the story that you're putting together here. We see a lot of NFL players that don't get what they want in the market, right? So I don't know if we can let that fully dictate, where we end up seeing him land. Look, the wide receiver market is pretty thin as well. So there could be a world where, now that T. Higgins is tagged, now that a player we're going to talk about soon is presumably going to completely reset the market, after that point, there's probably going to be a scramble, and there might be a couple teams that look to overspend on Keenan Allen a little bit, right? Like, the team-friendly deal is a great idea for the Chargers, but also a very long in the tooth. Keenan Allen might be looking at his last big payday opportunity and go end up on, I don't know, the Cardinals or some random team that tries to break the bank.
Yeah, that might be true. He kind of ended the year on a heater, so definitely helped himself get paid a little bit there. Steve, who is your wide receiver prediction for the 2025 NFL free agent class, my friend?
Yeah, I got the guy who's going to it's going to be a monster deal, and I think it's Chris Godwin going to the New England Patriots. This makes sense on every level for everyone involved. Chris Godwin can get paid stupid amounts of money because New England has $127 million in cap space.
He's also the clear wide receiver one of this class now, that if T. Higgins does go to back to Cincy.
Right. So, and I still thought he was the wide receiver one in this class regardless. come at me if you want, but this man was on his pace for a triple crown in the NFC before he got hurt. So Chris Godwin has done it. He's proven to be a number one wide receiver in the NFL. Drake May needs a number one guy. And frankly, I think Chris Godwin should look at New England and say, you know what? They'll probably pay him a little bit more than he's even worth just because they have the money to throw around and put talent around Drake May. I like Godwin landing in New England. It fits everyone's need. You need to build around Drake May. I'll say this. If the Patriots don't do this, if the Patriots don't land Chris Godwin or T. Higgins, they have failed Drake May. And they might as well abandon ship because they are going to ruin his development. He needs a guy who can get open. So I think that's Chris Godwin. I don't think that's the only move New England needs to make, but that's the number one move New England needs to make.
Yeah, my guy Andrew Erickson put out on Twitter earlier today, like, do you think Drake 1 will be a fantasy football QB1 in 2025? And I was shocked at the results that, like, most people were like, no, absolutely not. It was like 70-30 to people who, you know, I was in the very small minority of people who thought he would be a quarterback 1. And if he can get a guy like Chris Godwin, Eric, I mean, I'm already drafting Drake May in all my underdog best balls that I can get him right now at his current price tag as a quarterback 2. And I mean, I'd be all over if Godwin was in town.
Yeah, I would as well. The question of whether or not he can be a QB1 is kind of misleading, right? Because there are probably 15 quarterbacks that are in arguably better situations than Drake May, and we haven't seen him do it yet, right? So that's going to drag down. That's going to drag down those poll results.
He was on a QB1 pace last year, though, brother.
Yeah, that's the thing. We haven't seen him do it over the course of an entire season, right? So, like, my point is that's going to drag down those poll results when, if it was reframed as, you know, who has the highest upside among these 3 or 4 QB2 guys, Drake May would run away with it, right? So it's, you know, I wouldn't take that as super clear market signal, but I'm right there with you, right? You know, even without Chris Godwin, I love speculating in the Drake May markets, especially in best ball. He's got an absolute hose. He can do a bit with his legs. He'll be in his second season, getting more and more comfortable with the NFL level. But yeah, if nothing else, and this was my immediate response to T. Higgins getting the franchise tag, Chris Godwin is about to back up the Brinks truck wherever he wants to play. I think New England makes a ton of sense, right? You look at his game logs. He was obviously, you know, on pace to set the world on fire running out of the slot last year, but he's also got top 15, top 10, you know, top 2 fantasy point per game seasons out there when he was running on the perimeter way more often. So that type of versatility, that type of skill set for a young quarterback is monumental. They obviously have the room. Like, they have to go out there and get him.
Bring him home to the Keystone State, baby. Let's go. Let's go. We need you. We need you out in the Berg, Godwin. Come on.
With what money?
Not even a head shake from. Hey,
I don't want him in Pittsburgh. Who's throwing him the ball? It's just not there.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Don't you worry about it.
Trade Watt.
Easy now. All right, Eric, run us out. Your wide receiver prediction for the 2025 free agent class is?
Walking down narrative street, Stefon Diggs. I think there's actually reporting that there's optimism he'll return to Houston, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. It is lying season. And I can see a world where, look, Stefon Diggs, like, I think he sort of realizes that getting injured this year, however unfortunate it was, probably closed his window to go out and get another big contract one more time.
Yes.
I think he's probably going to be cobbling together his living on 1 or 2 year deals throughout the remainder of his career. And he's probably going to shift gears to ring chasing. And while the Chiefs just got absolutely dog walked in this most recent Super Bowl, they're still going to be one of the betting favorites for the Super Bowl heading into 2025. They already are. And they've shown that they are not shy about speculating with veteran wide receivers, right? They went out and brought in DeAndre Hopkins. They went out and brought in Juju Smith-Schuster again, right? Just to name a few. Hollywood Brown, right? Like, they are doing their best to draft and develop wide receivers. Xavier Worthy looks like a very promising prospect. Rashee Rice looks very promising. We have no idea how many games he's going to play next year. So Stefon Diggs that is waking up to the reality
Holy
of his
shit.
circumstance that is coming off of a catastrophic injury. I could see him, taking a long, hard look at like an incentive laden 1 or 2 year deal, trying to get a ring with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Objectives 1, sign Stefon Diggs. Objective 2, draft a good running back on day 2. And probably the most important objective that I put, down at 3 should be 1. Fix your offensive line through free agency in the draft. Those are really
number
one.
one.
But those are the 3 things. It's like add another running back, because as much as we like Pacheco, a little bit of an injury history coming out of Rutgers has shown that in the NFL. And then it's add a receiver and fix the line, Steve. Like those are the 4 things, and keep building that defense through the draft as well, adding youth.
I think adding a receiver can be a fine objective. I don't think that, not that I don't like the breakdown of why it makes sense. I just don't think with Rashee Rice also coming off of a knee injury, they're going to want to bring in 2 of their top 3 guys.
True.
Essentially being what are we going to get out of them because they're coming off of knee injuries? There's safer options in this draft class or in this free agent class. Personally, if I think there's a wide receiver that's going to sign with the Chiefs and resurrect a career, I think it's my guy Deontay Johnson.
No, come on.
I think that's probably.
He doesn't play another snap in the NFL.
Yeah, dog. He's head for the UFL.
I think he has a higher likelihood of landing on the Chiefs than Stefon Diggs does. Personally, Diggs doesn't fit. What do you use him for?
Tony on the streets.
Like it just doesn't seem to fit for me. But I've been wrong in the past. It's been known to happen.
Yeah. Hey, no, that's all right. And I love the predictions, guys. We're not going to get one out for Kadarius Toney because fuck you, Kadarius Toney. Just had to say that. That guy's been taking shots at not me in particular, but the internet, people like us in general. So need to get that off my chest. So thank you for allowing me to do it. Anyone else got any words for Kadarius Toney? Eric, Steve, any thoughts? I think he was also recently arrested, allegedly.
He's just, you know what? He is a perfect case of something like, doesn't like 25% of his career yardage come in one game or something stupid like that. I mean, like, talk about a flash in the pan. I mean, his run was shorter than Linsanity. Like, Kadarius Toney has no fucking leg to stand on when it comes to being like, why people put respect on my name, bro? You couldn't put respect on your name, so I'm not going to do it for you. The fuck.
I would talk to Kadarius Toney on an airplane.
Wow. Yeah, that's actually I'm with Steve. That's where I draw the line. If it was Kadarius Toney, I would talk to most people, but not Kadarius Toney. Michael in the chat saying Deontay Johnson just signed with the Toronto Argonauts. Is that a real team?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Shout out CFL, baby. Shout out CFL. They're coming back. I think CFL's back. Spring League football. You guys follow the UFL at all? Any big?
No.
Should we start doing some UFL betting? Betting?
Please don't make me watch the UFL.
There's a lane there. Like I know people that crush betting in DFS and UFL, but it is a grind.
Yeah. I mean, holy shit. If we want Steve to hate himself and be even more of a dick on airplanes, that might be the move.
Yeah, for real. I'd be grumpy as shit.
Weekly UFL article coming out on the site starting next week, Steve. Get it ready, baby.
Yeah, it'd be expletive laden.
All right, let's go ahead. Let's round out the show with our best ball tips for early drafts and weekly advice.
Weekly
All right, it's weekly advice. This week we are previewing 2025 best ball drafts over on Underdog Fantasy. And again, these are pre-NFL draft best ball drafts and free agency as well. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of shaking and baking to happen here over the next couple of weeks. So Eric, I want to throw it over to you, man. You're a veteran of the best ball streets. I know you frequent Underdog as much as you possibly can, get your grubby little hands on it. So, what are you thinking over there? What's calling your name? What is something that, hey, if I'm just getting the best ball, if I'm trying to become a better player, something that I should specifically keep in mind for these early drafts where a lot's still up in the air, my friend?
Yeah, that is the exact reason why you are drafting right now in January and in February. It is because one of my pillar rules for early offseason best ball. Chaos creates opportunity, right? Like the less we know about a player's circumstance, the more value we can potentially extract out of them. And the reason why I like this rule, I mean, every single year you can go back, and whether it is, unheralded rookie prospects that haven't yet showed out at the NFL draft, or we're not sure about their draft capital, whether it's guys that may have a teammate coming in and we're not too sure what their opportunity looks like. Obviously, there are going to be some misses in the mix, but every single year there are guys like Chuba Hubbard, like Jerry Jeudy, right? Like J.K. Dobbins that go out and pay dividends, and they're deep enough down the rosters, the ADP boards, to where if you miss, it's not really going to hurt you all that much. But if you hit, it can absolutely vault your team to a championship. So it's really a twofold piece of advice. Like, don't be afraid about uncertainty, because that's where you can draw a lot of value. But also, volume and exposure is king, right? You don't want to go out and have 90% exposure to a guy that is in a volatile situation. But if you go out and have 20, 25, 30%, that's fine. You can go out and build exposure to the opposite scenario, right? Let's say that they decide that they love Rico Dowdle in Dallas and they're going to keep him there and not draft a running back at all. Your 8 to 12% of builds that drafted Rico Dowdle super late are going to cover any of the losses on the alternative storyline that you're covering. So look, just lean into the uncertainty. It's where you find value, and know that it's going to be a portfolio. Some are going to hit and some are going to miss.
Yeah, and it wasn't last season, but I can remember 2 seasons ago, all the Jonathan Taylor stuff happening in the offseason. And when he was on the field, Jonathan Taylor was an absolute menace. And he was someone I was scooping up in best ball redrafts that year. I remember Zeke, when he had his suspension that I think came mid-season or something crazy like that. However, that thing shook out back, and I think that was 2017, I think was when that was. But either way, I think these situations, I mean, sometimes you get Brandon Ayuk, right? Like we got Brandon Ayuk last year. I had way too much exposure to him, and it kind of backfired on me, but that was more because of an injury, I'd say, rather than anything. But yeah, so I like the call out there. Steve, what do you have for our best ball players out there?
Yeah, for me, it's simple. It's easy. It's ceiling is the upside is always better than the floor. That's always what you're drafting. In best ball, you are not looking for the safe guy who's going to get you 10 points every week. No, you're looking for the guy who can explode for 25, 30 points, because odds are you will feel the team that scores some form of respectable score every single week, because it's best ball. But you need to be able to go over everyone else's best score. So you can't rely on a floor. You need the upside. This is where guys like Jameson Williams are so valuable. Like, Jameson Williams is a best ball maven. He is probably the most prototypical player for best ball.
Rashid Shaheed.
Rashid Shaheed, like low receptions, high yardage, high touchdown rate. That's what you're going after. Go after the guys who are like, well, all they do is score touchdowns. Well, then they better be on your fucking team. Like, that's what I will tell you. Like, if you hear people be like, oh, well, if they didn't have touchdowns, well, that's great, but they do. And so I'm taking them, and I'm going to take them all the way to the bank. Upside is better than floor.
Yeah, Eric, how do you weigh upside every single season? Because I absolutely do agree with Steve that in best ball, I am much more prone to taking swings, especially in those later rounds. But as I'm going to talk about with my tip, sometimes if you take too many swings, you don't have a lot of depth on those teams that you can't be picking up and plugging in different people every week, and you're kind of riding or dying with.
Yeah, I mean, the answer to your question is, this is why we don't fuck around in the early rounds, right? Like the guys that are being drafted in the first, 1-3 rounds are going up there because they have the upside that you're looking for, but they also have floor to provide that nice baseline of week over week scoring, right? So if you're going out there and drafting like Sam Laporta in the top 15 picks last year, right?
Sure.
Like, you can be completely annihilating your team because you're not getting the upside when he busts, and the floor is completely in the ceiling. So the sentiment is bang on. The way that you're not only going to make the playoffs, but advance through those very competitive tournament weeks when you're really getting into the big money in these tournaments is with guys that can randomly spike off of your bench and
Yeah.
get you a 5 spot, a 40 spot, right? So look, there are players that just have the skill set for that. There are players that, potentially could have things break in their favor in terms of, someone in front of them getting traded, getting injured, whatever it might be, maybe just playing their way into a role. There's a few different ways to find up that. But basically, before you click anyone's name, you should really be pausing and asking yourself, like, do they have, a top 5, top 10 percentile outcome on their range? And if they don't be shy to like scroll down on the list a little bit until you find a guy that you can say yes to that question to.
In those 30-second drafts, Eric, sometimes we don't have that second to pause. Sometimes you just got to fire away.
You always got time to scroll.
I actually found out that my my teams that I did fast drafts with, much better. I think when I could ponder and sit there and really overthink the situation, I often did. So just something I kind of noticed in my teams.
You're rough then.
Yeah, certainly. Something kind of along those same lines for my piece of advice is don't overexpose yourself to day 2 or day 3 rookies in these pre-draft best balls. So when I was going back through my teams for this process, for this show, a lot of my pre-draft best ball teams that did well last year, the thing I noticed about them is that they all had limited exposure to day 2 and day 3 rookies. I really, really got in the habit of wasting picks on guys like Malachi Corley, Roman Wilson, who barely saw the field at all, Ray Davis, who he had a couple spike weeks that kind of helped out my teams, I'm sure, but all guys who did not contribute enough to be not only worth the draft pick I paid for them, but to be worth the roster spot for the entire season. Right. I also had, and I had those early drafts too, where I drafted guys like Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas Jr., and that really worked out. So I'm not telling you not to draft rookies in general, but you got to make sure that they're going to have the draft capital be worth the risk of not knowing where they land here early in the process. So I know this time of year, it's super easy. We all get caught up in rookie fever, but just be mindful of exposures to players who could be absolute nothing burgers to your team in a league where you can't add or drop, Steve.
Yeah, no, this is great advice because realistically, the NFL is a tough business to break into, right? And if you're not a first or second round pick, and even second round picks, I would put a little asterisk next to them, you are not guaranteed any playing time at all. None. Zero. Nada. Mm-hmm. And even some first round picks, it's hard to get on the field. It takes a long, long time. So yeah, these day 2 and 3 rookies. And listen, there were some that I was pounding the table for. Trey Benson, Blake Corum.
Oh, geez.
Not to like bring up not to reopen an old wound, but like these guys, all the talent in the world coming out of college were like, this is the guy, right? Like it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
All the running back needy teams out there, yeah.
All the running back needy teams. Even if you have like someone like Zach Charbonnet, like you're watching, like he's the starter and he's playing well, and you're like, oh yeah, this is it. He's gonna be a fantasy viable guy for the rest of the season. No, that rug gets pulled right out from underneath you. So these later round pick guys, they're expendable to teams. They're not really worth as much to teams. So they're not going to rush them onto the field. They're not going to force them onto the field. So don't force them onto your fantasy team.
Eric, any final thoughts for you here on the rookies in general, or just pre-draft best ball leagues?
Yeah, it's maybe one of the biggest shifts that I've seen in best ball markets over the last like 3 or 4 years, right? I'd say like 4 or 5 years ago, the light bulb really went off that like rookies are one of the best ways to capture and inject upside into your team, right? Because if they come in, they step into a big role and they have this talent, they can go off. The difference was, 4 or 5 years ago, you were getting first and second round rookies in like the 150s, the 160s, 170s, very late, right? And once that light bulb went off, boom, everyone shot up. Marvin Harrison is like a top 11 pick all of a sudden, right? So all of the first round guys moved, all of the first and second round draft capital guys moved into the top 3, 4, 5 rounds of your best ball drafts. And in turn, the rest of the market moved up with them, right? Guys like Jalen Wright and Adonai Mitchell are going in the 140s, right? Like, so with best ball, we're talking about a portfolio, we're talking about exposure. So everything has to be put into the context of cost, right? If you want to take a last guy in late round flyer on a day 3 pick, fine, right? But now the cost has gotten to the point where you really have to have a high degree of confidence that you're finding the next Bucky Irving or Tyrone Tracy when you're spending a 9th round pick on a guy. And in turn, it's hard to do that. So your exposure needs to be walked down, right? You should be floating like 8 to 12% tops on any of these guys.
Brother, I don't even honestly want to tell you my Malachi Corley exposure last year. It was ignorant. I bet it was north of 40. Oh, brother. We ain't, if we're playing higher or lower, we still got a ways to go, brother.
Woo.
Yeah,
general rule of thumb, don't have 40% exposure to anyone in best ball.
Yeah.
Malachi Corley? That's such a weird guy to like really plant your flag on.
I know.
Frisky Jets.
Well, that was even before I was even before it was Frisky Jets. I was just I've always, you guys know me, my G5 conferences. I love the G5s and Western Kentucky, right? Like, air raid.
This was Reese's Senior Bowl overreaction.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, he was there, baby. He was there. We got our guy Herms in the chat saying, "Hey, man, we gotta keep the faith with Roman Wilson alive. Where's your fan bias, Seth?" Laughing my ass off, Herms. I know, man. I know. I still got him in a couple dynasty leagues. We're gonna ride this son of a bitch out. But when I look back at what other Steelers fans in my league were offering me for Roman Wilson, I got some regret. I got some buyer's remorse, brother. But hey, Herms, great to see you, brother. Appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. Hope you're having a great Tuesday evening. And then we got Ben in the chat. Don't disrespect the Yak King. That's what they called him, man. That's what they called him. But you got to get yards to get yards after the catch. You got to catch the ball to get yards after the catch.
Yeah, he's missing a bit.
We got Michael in the chat saying, in best ball, get your anchor starters, then go for the high upside players. Absolutely. Michael's a sharp as always. Guys, one absolute pleasure. Steve, Eric, thank you both for bringing your talents down here to South Beach on the IBT podcast. Guys, please like this video if you enjoy this type of content. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're new. It's the easiest way to support us. And also, catch us wherever you get your podcast. We also got a lot of great content coming out on the In Between Media site. And also, be sure to get your draft night out tickets if you want to come draft with us and 200 of our closest friends in person. For Steve Lawson and the man, Eric Romoff, a big business son of a bitch, Eric Romoff, I am Seth Wilcock. Thanks for watching, and keep it in between. Until next time.